Yeah, it's an interesting switch when you are one of the peers and now you are having to manage those peers so that there's a lot, especially at that young of an age, and I've dealt with that in my life a lot because when I was at PacSun, I was also the youngest store manager in our region. When I started as a vice president here, as the youngest vice president Tennessee Aquariums ever had. So whether or not it's truly there, you always have that aura of in the industry we talk about imposter syndrome, like this person's young, should they be in this role? And really in those early roles, I kind of had to learn the difference, when to stop being the friend and start leading.
Tired of outdated systems holding your attraction back?
Gatemaster believes technology is part of the experience, transforming every touchpoint into an opportunity.
Imagine seamless online booking, effortless mobile ordering, and data-driven insights at your fingertips.
Ready to revolutionize your guest journey and maximize revenue?
Power your attraction with Gatemaster.
Discover the future at gatemaster.com.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros Podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros Podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
It's going fantastically, Josh. And how are you?
I'm doing great. Question for you.
Yes.
You're a musician, aren't you?
Uh-huh.
You play the drums.
I do.
You were in a band called Voodoo Hoedown.
Among others, but yes. That was
well, that's the one I
yes.
saw. I
Yes.
saw two of your concerts.
Yes.
Did you tour at all?
I wouldn't say we toured as a musician. I played a lot of gigs here and there, but I did get closer to touring as a sound guy and a lighting guy. So there was a little bit more of an element of touring in that part of my life than playing drums.
Well, I saw you in Orlando and Sanford. So that's, that feels like a tour, a Central Florida tour, right?
I think if you don't go home in between, it can be considered a tour. But
I guess so, yeah.
yeah.
While you were in the band, or while you said as close to touring as doing, what was it, Sound and Light?
Sound and Lights for a top 40 dance band in New Hampshire.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Were there any lessons that you learned from from either touring or being in the band?
Yes. And I will share them with you if you'd like.
That's okay. I just wanted to know. Just a yes or no question. That was like the rookie mistake of interviews, right? Is asking a yes or no question.
That's okay.
And moving on. Now, let's see.
And now, well,
yeah.
I will tell you one thing that I definitely took away from that experience is that there's a lot of people in the music business who focus more on the music than the business, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but they don't understand the power of relationships. And, maybe in their band or in their little clique they do, but a lot of times you will get kind of tug of wars between, this band or that band, and they're trying to one up the other band. And there's just a lot of drama that sometimes happens in that field. And so one of the things that I definitely learned and kind of brought with me from my kind of customer service and hospitality background is just being nice to people, being kind to other band members, helping other people out. And I think that went a long way with the relationships that I was able to build in that kind of in that industry, if you will, because it was, even if I did it just a little bit, it was that much different than what other people were doing.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, the reason I ask is because our guest today is Michael Floyd. He is the Vice President and Chief Guest Experience Officer at the Tennessee Aquarium in beautiful Chattanooga, Tennessee. What does this have to do with being a touring musician? Well, before becoming an executive leader at one of the nation's top aquariums, Michael was, in fact, a touring musician. We got to hear just lessons on networking, on relationship building, on branding, on retail from his time on the road.
And one of the things that sort of permeated all of his conversations and many of his lessons was the concept of respect. He did mention that it's one of the values at the aquarium, but it's also something that you can tell just kind of oozes from his personality of treating other people with respect. He talked about that in the realm of, you know, in being in a band, of showing other people respect, and I think that just sort of is the foundation or the table stakes for him in any relationship or any interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, he talks about how the Tennessee Aquarium is consistently ranked as being one of the top aquariums in the United States. They are regularly seen as #1 in hospitality, which means they're known for providing great customer service. But he also talks about the way that they're able to get employees enthusiastic about the mission is by really connecting employees directly to it and making sure that everything the guests are experiencing, the employees have a front row seat to that as well, so that they can then turn that over to the guests that they're interacting with.
Did you hear what you just did?
No.
You said they have a front row seat, which from a touring musician's perspective, you want that front row filled because those are the most enthusiastic fans. So is it time to tune up the guitars and drums and get to this interview with Michael?
Let's grab the roadies and hit the road. Oh, that's what they're called, roadies. Hey, Michael, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. We are so excited to have you on today. How are you?
Doing great. How are y'all?
Doing wonderful. Really excited to chat more about you and all about Tennessee Aquarium. So as we kick this off here, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your background and little of your career journey.
Sure. My name is Michael Floyd. I'm the Vice President and Chief Guest Experience Officer here at the Tennessee Aquarium. Been at the Tennessee Aquarium for 8 years. Before that, I spent 12 years in retail management. So when I actually had to look back at my LinkedIn, funny enough, and say, well, when did I start managing people? So basically, when I was 18, I was in a supervisor role for Gap Inc. I worked at Old Navy, worked at Gap, got a call from a manager I used to work with that was then working at Aeropostale, which is how we're supposed to pronounce it, and moved into a role as an assistant manager there. Worked there at a couple stores in the North Georgia area for a few years, and then a position came open with Pacific Sunwear, and I spent about 4.5 years as a store manager for Pacific Sunwear in a smaller market. Did some traveling with them, kind of refitted stores, re-merchandised them all throughout the Southeast region. And then that store, they did some downsizing of the company. So a lot of the stores ended up closing, and I used that as an opportunity to go back to school. I always joke and say I was on the 10-year program for my bachelor's, but I went back to school at Dalton State College, which is in North Georgia, and I finished my bachelor's in technology management while I was managing at Hot Topic for about 5 years. Also, while I was a touring musician for about 10 years during that time. So basically, there was a period of time where all my PTO time was spent on the road or at school, going through a lot. I wasn't married then or didn't have kids then. So it was, I had a lot more time to dedicate to those kind of things. And then after I finished my bachelor's and had been at Hot Topic for a while, I kind of started looking and wondering, I really want to try to do something different. It happens often when you get stuck, like, for example, in retail, especially when you work in malls together with other people. They always say that, you're going to work retail your whole life. You can't get out, you can't do other things. And I really took a leap of faith and I started looking at what kind of jobs were out there that were exciting. And really, the Tennessee Aquarium was the first place I looked at. It was a place that I loved growing up. I came here on a field trip in 1992 when the building first opened. And I started thinking, if I really want to be working somewhere, spending most of my life, can I do it somewhere that's fun? And an opportunity came open as an admissions assistant manager. at the Tennessee Aquarium. So I moved into that role. And then you kind of realize just how connected all of those skills that I learned in retail really were. I mean, really, I started thinking about, I was like, this isn't that much different. I was selling thousands of products. Now I'm selling a ticket and all these add-on experiences. So it's a lot more connected, I think, than you let yourself believe or other people tell you. So I was probably in that role for about a year and a half. And then the gift shops manager at the Tennessee Aquarium retired after being here almost 30 years. And I said, hey, I know how to do that. I've done that for a long time. So I moved into that role, was there for about 2 years. We were able to hit our highest revenue ever while I was there. And then we went through an outsourcing and I moved into a store director role with Event Network. So technically there's a period of time for about 2.5 years where I worked for an outsourcing partner, but my office has always been at the Tennessee Aquarium. Event Network at that time saw value in me. They started sending me across the country. I started helping them open other locations, spent some time in Georgia, spent some time in Colorado. And then I was lucky enough that a vice president position came open at the Tennessee Aquarium, and very lucky that the president, CEO, and senior leadership at that time said, you know what, this guy keeps going off in the country and we want him to stay here. So I was able to move back over to the Tennessee Aquarium as vice president, which has been fantastic. It feels weird to say that in 8 years I've been able to move from assistant manager to VP, but I have.
That's so awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Michael. There's a lot to unpack there. And where I'd like to start, if it's okay, is you said you kind of started managing people when you were 18. And I work with a lot of young leaders, and there's a lot of growing pains and trials and tribulations when you move into your first leadership role. So I'm wondering if you can kind of think back to those days and share with us some of those lessons you may have learned early on, whether it was through, specific formal education in leadership or just kind of, putting your feet out there and seeing what happens.
Yeah, it's an interesting switch when you are one of the peers and now you are having to manage those peers, so that there's a lot, especially at that young of an age, and I've dealt with that in my life a lot, because when I was at PacSun, I was also the youngest store manager in our region. When I started as a vice president here, as the youngest vice president the Tennessee Aquarium's ever had. So whether or not it's truly there, you always have that aura of in the industry, we talk about imposter syndrome, like this person's young, should they be in this role? And really in those early roles, I kind of had to learn the difference, when to stop being the friend and to start leading. To start managing.
Yeah.
And I feel like managing was something that I learned pretty early on. Here's our goal for the day, getting the group together. But leading was not something that I felt like I really got to learn until I started my time at Hot Topic. That organization had a lot of benefits that they offered staff. It was a place that, all were welcome. Everyone could be themselves. And that's when I really started to learn how to lead. But yeah, in the early days, it really was just navigating I am seen at a different level now. I need to react differently. I need to handle these things. I can't joke around as much and be the funny guy, even though at the core, that's who I am. So just navigating that whole process, it took time, but it was worth it in the end.
I'm curious then to expand on that, to kind of add another layer to this, is that you're in a role where you are leading leaders as well. So the ones who you are supporting are experiencing that, exactly what you just described, at 18 years old, and are now managing their peers. How do you then weave that into your leadership style for the leaders who are reporting to you that may be experiencing those similar types of growing pains?
I think it's just being conscious about, all of the things that I had to learn and work through during that process. Understanding also that everybody learns in a different way, and the things that work for me may not work for other people. And I think you'll hear a lot. What I'll always talk about is respect, starting from a place of respect. Something I tell my teams all the time is like, look, because there's always a fear. There's a fear of failure sometimes. And we talk about making sure that we give space for people to succeed or fail. And if they fail, that's okay. That's part of the process. We can learn from that. But we shouldn't not do something because there's a fear of failure. And I try to empower my leaders, and hopefully, get that out to everybody that I manage. And that is, you're never going to get in trouble for trying to do your job. If you are doing what in your mind is best for the guest that is coming into our building, that's great. If it's not how I would have handled it, if it's not how your manager would have handled it, that's fine. We can go back later. We can talk through that. We can make adjustments. But I don't ever want anyone to feel like, oh, I need to question this action I'm about to take because how would so and so feel about this? And we end up not delivering, that, or not exceeding expectations with our guests, which is what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think there's such an empowering act to say, you make this decision and we're going to follow through with it. And then maybe it didn't go as exactly as you thought it was going to. And then you coach them and say, hey, we could look at this a little differently next time, rather than saying, slap their hand and say, okay, well, you're out now. You don't get to work here anymore because you made that decision. That just de-empowers them, if that makes sense. So I love hearing you talk in that way, because I agree. A lot of things that we do are based on fear, right? And if we can remove that fear, then we can get the people to blossom into really be great team members. And kind of where I'm going with this a little bit is, you had a lot of retail experience before you came to the aquarium, and you said that there's a lot of kind of carryover. So I'm curious, was that sort of empowering mindset developed through the time in retail, and then now you're bringing it to the aquarium? Or I guess maybe that's the question. How has that developed over the years for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the abilities you're going to learn in retail, customer service, as bottom on the pole is greeting people. All of those skills are something that are transferable into what we do now. And it was interesting because I felt like I learned a lot about customer service from the beginning. But it wasn't until I worked at an organization, and really it was Hot Topic, that allowed their teams, their store managers, to express themselves, to be themselves, when I really started to learn, like, this is what it could mean to lead. A great example was that they provide tools that other organizations don't necessarily think of. But one, you can wear whatever you want when you come to work. You can look however you want. Everyone is welcome. So everyone gets to come to a space where they're themselves. And, they're an organization that for decades was doing that before most organizations are now allowing, the different hair colors, the tattoos. Even, we're accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and most of those organizations, it took a long time to get to that point where it was like, yes, we want you to come as you. And that's why I tell my staff all the time, I want you to be who you are. What I care about is how you treat people while they're here. If you treat them great, I don't care what you look like. That doesn't matter. So that was time really where I got to learn, what other tools were they, and how can you blossom from that? And a lot of that falls back on music. When I worked there, and it's a little different now, I've heard from people that I used to work with, but you would have a hard drive of 500 albums, and you could select, as the manager working, what music you wanted to listen to. So I was working at Northgate Mall as a store manager here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I understood that for my market, we had a record store in the mall. There was an older clientele. And if I put Prince or David Bowie or Queen on, those people would come in. And the great thing was the kids just wanted to be there. So they were just happy to be there no matter what. But if you put those on and the parents started hearing those bands, but I want to hear the next song, I want to stay. And so you start really looking at, we talk about it in our industry as dwell time, but really I was looking at that in retail. How long now are these families spending in the store? And also finding out, what is your favorite band? And then once you start to know those regular customers, they walk in, you see them, you're automatically putting on the album from their favorite band when they come to shops. You're creating just this curated experience. So that, thinking about that, and that was really the first time I started thinking about branding beyond playing as a musician, and how we worked through that, which they were great at supporting as well. They gave band grants. They also gave opportunities for feedback. So anyone that had an idea for a t-shirt, you could send it in. Anyone that thought there was some new music that we needed to know about, you could send those recommendations in. So it was great to see how people can excel when they're just allowed to be themselves. And that's what I try to bring into our organization.
That's really interesting. And I just had kind of a little bit of a light bulb go off here, maybe just kind of bridging retail into the aquarium experience. And you talked about kind of the parallels between it. You talked about the customer service aspect of it and all of that. And I'm wondering if you look at it through the lens of saying in retail, you need to provide great customer service because you want them to buy something. Like that is the end result of it. But in the aquarium or in the attractions industry, we need to provide great customer service because they've already bought it. And now we need to validate the decision, the confidence in what they've bought. Do you see it that same way too?
No, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, we want them to come back. That's why your exhibits, things are always evolving. You want to give them a reason. We just expanded some of our program offerings on site for everyone that purchases a general admission ticket. And it's really, there's probably more than someone can do in a day. And that's good. We want a reason for you to be able to come back. Like, oh, this was such an amazing experience, but I didn't get to see, that penguin program, and we got to come back and do that. So really thinking about how we make sure that not only do they have an amazing time and a great experience, but they want to come back or they want to share it with their family and friends.
Well, Michael, I'm wondering, since maybe some people aren't as familiar with the Tennessee Aquarium, can you kind of walk us through the experience?
Sure. So Tennessee Aquarium opened in 1992, the original building. When it opened, it was the largest freshwater aquarium in the United States, or in the world. It's currently the largest freshwater aquarium in the United States. It really was amazing. Whenever the Lyndhurst Foundation kind of put the money together and looked at, what do we need to do to revitalize downtown Chattanooga, thinking about building a freshwater aquarium, something that reflects the region that we're in. The Southeast has more freshwater biodiversity than any part of the United States. So it really speaks to who we are here in Tennessee and North Georgia in this region. So it really, that experience, being able to come to the Tennessee Aquarium and follow the story, which is following a drop of water from the top of the Appalachian Mountains all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And in 2005, so 20 years ago, we just had an anniversary, we opened our Ocean Journey building. So for one ticket, you get two buildings, the aquarium. River Journeys are entirely freshwater aquarium. And then Ocean Journey will have those things that you typically see at other aquariums. We'll also have our lemur forest. We'll have our penguins, butterfly garden, and then our largest saltwater tank, which is 640,000 gallons of water. So the experience itself, coming to the Tennessee Aquarium, what I love is that you really get to come and appreciate those rivers, lakes, and streams that surround you. I was looking at a study the other day where 90% of the world's population live within 6 miles of a freshwater body or freshwater source, which makes sense. We need it to live. And this is an organization where you can come and you can actually see what's going on beneath the surface, because there's so much. It's literally an underwater rainforest, is what we like to refer it as. So coming to the Tennessee Aquarium, going through that experience, and then getting to go home. Our mission is to connect people with nature and empower them to make informed decisions about water and wildlife. And so getting that slice that everyone gets to see, that now when they go home and they look at those lakes and streams and rivers, they can go, I've seen what's underneath that. And it's amazing, because typically you're just on top of the water, either fishing or boating or enjoying it. But it's truly amazing to go through. And the experience itself, going through the buildings, Cambridge 7 designed, there was an architectural firm that designed the buildings. They worked on the New England Aquarium, National Aquarium. And we actually had a person visit from one of those recently, and they said, they really fine-tuned everything by the time they built the Tennessee Aquarium. And it really is. Most people come here and they expect, like, I need a map to get around when I'm in the buildings because I'm going to be lost. But for us, you start at the top of the building, you work your way down, you don't miss anything when you go through the buildings. Granted, having a plaza with buildings that are separated does create some wayfinding issues. But generally, when you're in the buildings, you don't miss anything when you go through. So it really creates a great experience for our guests.
The linear experience is definitely very, I mean, it's very unique in the way that it's laid out. And like you said, you don't miss everything, or you don't miss anything. So you see everything. You get to the top and you work your way down. You're like, okay, and then you actually know, okay, I've completed the experience, rather than in other models, if it's a little bit of more difficult to navigate, you wonder, have I done everything? Do I need to backtrack, etc. The other thing too is Tennessee Aquarium consistently ranks as one of the top aquariums in the country, and I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about why that might be the case.
Sure. So we work with Impact's Experience. So they work with 224 cultural organizations in the world, and do a lot of surveys and rankings, and we consistently rank in the top 1% for hospitality. And that's really, hospitality for Chattanooga, for the Tennessee Aquarium. It's really our bread and butter. And for us, it's been this way for a very long time, but the culture of the Tennessee Aquarium, customer service is our first core value. And it is something that everyone at the organization embodies, which is great, because we've had a lot of visitors from other organizations. When they see these scores, when they see where the results come out, they come and they visit. They want to say, "Hey, what are y'all doing that's different?" And it's amazing. None of it is really. None of it's really different than what you would see at other organizations. The difference is that everyone at the organization does it. So, for example, our husbandry staff understands that if we are bringing someone behind the scenes, they are a VIP. They don't know who they are. It doesn't matter. They treat them like a VIP. We're also welcomed in those spaces, which is typically different from a lot of zoos and aquariums. So we have designated areas throughout the buildings where we know at any time, for any reason, hey, it's your birthday. Oh, you're here for an anniversary. Let me take you behind the scenes. We call them behind the scenes snapshots, because it's an experience that we can curate. It could be 5 minutes. It could be 30 minutes. We could do it longer if we want to go to multiple spaces throughout the building. But we have, in River Journey and Ocean Journey spaces, we can bring guests to start their tour, so it doesn't even disrupt how they're about to start, to go up to the top of the buildings and provide a little sneak peek behind the scenes. And then anyone they interact with, really just people are so excited to see them. A lot of our staff, especially those that work with the animals, they are passionate about what they do, and they are happy to share that with anyone they interact with, especially people that are here, excited, interested. And that's typically every guest that you have coming through the building.
So I'm curious, Michael, if we can kind of peel back the onion a little bit on the way that this happens, because you talk about the fact that you're not doing that much different, but you're doing it consistently. And that, I think, is different from a lot of places. And especially when you talk about the behind the scenes, the front of house, that seamless kind of hospitality experience, no matter where people are. I think that is probably part of the secret sauce. So are you able to kind of tell us a little bit about how that comes to be, like your messaging and the culture that you have there at the aquarium?
So we are very lucky that we have a lot of people here at the Tennessee Aquarium that have been here 30 years plus. A lot that have seen the value in what it means to treat people with respect and to treat every guest like they're a VIP. And it starts with the smallest things. It's that we saw someone creating an experience for a guest that went above and beyond. We have a morning huddle every morning. Notes from that are sent out that everyone has access to. And so we celebrate those. We talk about those. We do shout outs, whether it's through email, whether it's at the morning huddle, and really just celebrating those. And I'm very lucky in that I came to the organization and this was already happening. This had been here for a very long time, this culture. And really my role here is just to kind of enhance and help that culture thrive. And a lot of that, I talked a little bit about the mission, connecting people to water and wildlife, and we've had a lot of conversations recently, because if we expect our employees to connect people to water and wildlife, first, we need to connect our employees to water and wildlife. So we started having conversations. We have a Conservation Institute, which is state of the art. They do amazing work. And really saying, how many employees have been out to the Conservation Institute and seen the work that we're doing? And then bringing them out there and connecting that. And now when they're at the touch tank, when we're talking about our lake sturgeon program and how we've released over 440,000 into the Tennessee and Cumberland rivers over the past 25 years, they're speaking from a personal and emotional connection because they saw it. They, in some cases, may have touched the animal. We have a touch tank for our lake sturgeon. So really just looking at how do we continue to cultivate that. And how do we expand on that? We've got customer service. What else can we look at adding to make sure that everyone feels responsible for sharing the mission of the Tennessee Aquarium?
By connecting the employees to the mission and being able to ensure that they're able to experience it directly, then they're able to then transfer that to the guest with enthusiasm that is purely natural and organic and authentic, versus saying, here are all the great things we do, make sure to speak about it enthusiastically. And you can read it on this chart and on this back of house poster. It's no, you truly immerse the employee into the experience to make sure that they're able to then really get the guests just as excited as they are. So I appreciate you sharing that. One of the things, I'm curious too, you talk about how there's the two separate buildings, the River Journey, the Ocean Journey. There's also the IMAX building. There's the ticket building. There's a number of, I would call it more like a campus that's embedded nicely into downtown Chattanooga. And I'm wondering if you're able to talk about not just kind of telling us how how the buildings are necessarily laid out, but really the way that it's integrated into the city and the aquarium's importance to Chattanooga as a whole.
Sure, and you're correct in that it really does feel like a campus, and it does provide some issues. Wayfinding, that's something that we constantly look at. You add signs, you add people, but unfortunately, there's still people that don't get the message. It's I'm sure y'all know that not everyone reads signs, not everyone reads their ticket confirmation when they purchase the ticket. So we have to work through a lot of those. As far as the importance for the city of Chattanooga, I mean, I was in grade school when the Tennessee Aquarium opened. For the region as a whole, the Tennessee Aquarium itself, it was nothing that we'd had before. And now, this day and age, yes, you wake up, today and you say, I want to go to an aquarium. You have 3 options within driving distance of where we currently are. But there was nothing like it. And there's a reason that the Tennessee Aquarium is a case study for so many cities. There's a reason we get so many organizations and city leaders that come and visit. When you talk about the economic impact for Chattanooga, since opening in 92, it's over $5 billion. And that's from people that said, hey, we came to Chattanooga to come to the Tennessee Aquarium, and here's how much money we spent while we're here. So you're looking at $187 million around a year in economic impact for really $45 million for River Journey, $30 million for Ocean Journey. So for a $75 million investment, that rate of return is significant. When you kind of marry that with just the Tennessee Aquarium focusing on freshwater, something that most aquariums do the opposite of, and really looking at celebrating what is in our backyard and getting people to appreciate, where we're at right now, the Tennessee River in between Lookout and Signal Mountains. Like, this is a beautiful, it's one of the most beautiful places in the country. There's a reason that Chattanooga, there's a recent report I was reading, it was from Pods, the movements company. And they were talking about, the top places in the United States that people are moving to. And Chattanooga was number 11 out of every city in the United States on that study. And there's Tennessee Aquarium really is a big part of that. It is the heartbeat of downtown, is really where we're at. And when you also think about the conservation work that we get to do from our funded, we're a nonprofit. So a lot of that goes back into either providing access for school kids who couldn't afford to come otherwise, We also do bus grants. So when the school kids say, hey, it's great that it's free, but we can't afford the gas to get there, we cover a portion of that for bus grants. We have a ton of conservation programs that we do. I talked about lake sturgeon. We work with brookies, so Appalachian brook trout as well, which are the only trout that's native to our area. And there's a lot of projects. We had a very successful story really just last year with the Laurel Days. It's a small minnow that was on the verge of extinction. We had partners call us in, hey, if we don't, we had some droughts just north of here, and they said, hey, if we don't get these fish out, they're probably going to go extinct. So the Tennessee Aquarium Conservation Institute was able to go in, take samples from a couple creeks, and luckily we're at a point now where we have been able to reintroduce them successfully back into those streams. So it's the work that we get to do is impactful for the community, and providing those educational resources for the greater Chattanooga area, really for our region. It's really important.
So, Michael, I'm curious how you tell that conservation story, only because I've never been to the Tennessee Aquarium. I do want to visit, of course, but I've been to some other places where the message is really about what you're seeing in front of you, and then the conservation is kind of behind the scenes. So I'm curious, as you talk about that kind of economic and community impact, how are you sharing that story of conservation with your guests and the people of Chattanooga?
So the best example of how we share that on site would be at our sturgeon touch tank in our River Journey building. That is the best place where we can really talk about the impact of our conservation work. We do have other places throughout the buildings where it's kind of woven in, but that's something you always look at and go, we really could do more of this. And that's something that we continuously look at. How do we share this message? How do we highlight this work? Because we're really doing great work, especially with freshwater species in our backyard. And people at a higher level know that, but how do you get that message out? So that's something that we consistently work through, and really, like I talked about, empowering those associates to have that personal connection, to be able to share that with our guests. That's the best way that we're currently doing that. It's something that we'll have to consider, because our offsite facility, it's not one that has a parking lot or a size that we can accommodate thousands of people going through and touring. We get to do some smaller education groups, but how do you get more people to really see that work? And we're still working through that.
So this might be putting you on the spot here just a little bit, but are there any stories that you like to share that really exemplify all the things that you're talking about, in the way that the conservation message is brought up front, and connecting employees to the mission, in the guest experience, the hospitality, so kind of bringing all that together? If there are any specific stories or examples that come to mind.
So we have a visitor satisfaction survey that we send out. Every guest that purchases a general admission ticket gets an invitation to complete that. And on there, we ask about, whether someone feels compelled to take conservation action, or if they learn something new. And typically what comes to mind when you say that is just the comments that we see from people that talk about, I never knew there was this much biodiversity where I live. I appreciate, our lakes, rivers, and streams more. Those type of comments. And we see those consistently every single month. Obviously, we'd like to see if we can increase that, and that'll be something that we can continue to track. But that's what pops in my mind immediately.
Nice.
So, Michael, earlier you mentioned your life as a musician and touring, and you brought in a little bit of the stories of how you sort of curated that experience for your guests with the music that you were playing in the store. And I'm curious, were there other lessons that you learned about either leadership or branding, or just kind of positioning your product, that you learned from being a musician on the road?
No, absolutely. It's and I talked a little bit about respect, which is also one of the core values of the Tennessee Aquarium. But that's kind of what I default to when I think about, time touring with our band, and building a fan base, and it really boils down to how you present yourself, the respect you show other people. So, when you're touring, you're showing up to the venue a little early. you're probably asking the promoter if they need help with anything. They're probably going to say no, but they're going to remember that you asked them if they need help with anything. When the opening bands are playing, you are standing there and you are watching their entire set. You are talking to them after they've played. Even let's say that it's not the kind of music you're really into. As a musician, I'm sure you can understand there's usually always like, oh, that bridge that you had there, or that effect that you were using, like that was really cool. Like there's always something positive that you can go through and focus on and kind of talk through, and really being there and showing that type of respect to other people, you start to get that back. And when we first started touring, the name of the band I was in was Tirezline, so it's the name of the castle from the movie Willow. Then I'll go ahead and say, if anyone's looking it up, there's a lot of hollering. I'll just say you probably won't like it. That way, if you do, it's a bonus. But when we were first, booking tours and talking to smaller labels, it was tough. You'd start to look at, hey, we want to do 2 weeks, and it may take you 2 months to book those shows. And most of the time, it's a trade. You're saying, hey, I'll book you in Kalamazoo if y'all will book us when we're in Tennessee or when we're in Georgia. And so you did a lot of that, but you got to the point where because you showed other people respect, even if they didn't necessarily like your music, when we'd start to book tours, it gets to the point where I could book a 2-week tour in 2 days. There's a couple different phrases we all used to use. People always talk about DIY, but in bands and what we do, we always talk about DIT. It's do it together, because that's really what you're doing. You're building this community together. You're putting on these shows together. You're starting these labels together, releasing music together. So we talk a lot about that. The other thing that ends up happening, and that I'm sure anyone that's played in music knows, that you get to a point where people, you call them family, and so for us, you got to the point you have that respect. And when you're about to book a tour, they'll reach out on your behalf and they'll say, hey, here's Michael from Tirezline, their family, take care of them. And then it happened. And it's amazing, because even, we haven't played since 2020. So we did it for about 10 years, played through most states in the United States. But we still, if I run into someone from 15 years ago, even, you have that, oh my gosh, it's family, the embrace, the, how have you been, it's like seeing a family member, literally. And then some of what I also really learned about, we talked about building brands and some of the retail experience I brought into that was thinking about new ways of selling, and how do we get things in people's hands. A lot of bands at that time, you'd burn a CD, I got a free CD for you. You'd pass them out at the show. But then we started looking at, well, what if, everybody's going to do that? What if for example, we found a 13-inch CRT TV. So what if we put this at a merch table? We put Mortal Kombat on it on Sega Genesis, and we say, hey, beat one of us in Mortal Kombat, get a free CD. And so now you have people that may not have wanted the CD that are coming up just because they want to beat you in Mortal Kombat. Maybe you let a few of them win, maybe you don't, but they get a CD out of it. We also got to the point where we started creating combos. We kind of leaned in to a couple different tropes and just said, here's the Royale with cheese. It comes with a record. It's $5 more. And so, the person that's selling is in like, hey, for $5 more, you can get this vinyl record. And it's funny how many people I've heard from that did that years ago that say, I didn't want the vinyl record, but it was only $5 more. And y'all were the first vinyl record I ever owned. And now I have a collection of 100 or 200 records. Wow. And so, being that band that started that for somebody, connecting to people in that way, that's what I loved about it.
That's so cool. That's so interesting. Looking at or looking at touring as a band through the lens of retail, and that, and you were doing that in reverse as well when you were working in retail as well, and then bringing all of that with you into the role today. So just a few minutes left here as we start to wind down. Curious, if somebody's visiting Chattanooga, then aside from visiting the aquarium, which of course needs to, must be part of the itinerary, what would you recommend? What's a can't miss?
There's so much to do in Chattanooga. We always talk about it because it's a destination that is affordable but punches way above its weight. So if you're coming and you're just like, hey, I just want to visit a couple cultural organizations, obviously Tennessee Aquarium, just downtown near us, you have the Hunter Museum of American Art. You have the Creative Discovery Museum. If you've got a little one, that's a great science museum to bring them to. Talking about being AZA accredited, the Chattanooga Zoo is also an AZA accredited facility. So you have a zoo experience that, I have a 5-year-old, and it's a place that I know I don't have to spend all day, but I can spend a couple hours. My toddler can get tired and we can see a lot of cool stuff. And then when you start to zoom out just a little bit, I mean, you have some destinations that are truly unique in the United States. You've got Ruby Falls, you've got Rock City. There's even smaller places like the Towing and Trucking Museum, because tow trucks were invented in Chattanooga. So there's a lot of just really interesting places to be. You also have the minor league baseball team, the Chattanooga Lookouts, which I think, Josh, you got to go to a game while you were here.
Yeah.
They're actually moving into a brand new stadium next year, which is going to be huge for the city of Chattanooga. So that there's so much to do here. You could literally spend a week and not do everything. But if you're just going to go to a couple things personally, obviously the Tennessee Aquarium, but I would go up to Rock City and see that it is beautiful. It is unique. There is nothing like it.
Very cool. Well, thank you for those recommendations. And I want to go back to the Tennessee Aquarium. Do you have a favorite exhibit or an animal that you have there at the aquarium?
So favorite animal, poison dart frog. I know I probably should talk about a fish, and if I'm going to, it'll probably be an arapaima, because they're really cool too. But yeah, the poison dart frogs, they're beautiful, also deadly, but great thing about working at zoos and aquariums is you learn something new every day. So I learned after I started here that they're poisonous based off of their diet in the wild. So the ones that we have on exhibit are actually not poisonous anymore because they are not eating that diet. But yeah, that poison dart frogs are always my favorite, but the arapaima, if I have to pick a freshwater fish to look at, they're massive. They're just really cool. And in the Amazon rainforest, when it floods, they'll jump out of the water. They'll eat birds and monkeys out of trees. And when you tell a kid that, they're like, "That's my favorite fish." So,
wow.
yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Michael, we are just so thankful for your time today, and we're getting close to the end here. But if people want to learn more about the Tennessee Aquarium, if they want to get a hold of you directly, find your music on a music streaming platform, where would you send them?
Sure. So if they want to learn about the Tennessee Aquarium, just go to tnaqua.org. That's tnaqua.org. Look for Tennessee Aquarium on any of the social channels. We should be on everything. And if we're not on something, let us know. We'll fix that. For me personally, my email is mtf and the number 2 at tnaqua.org. Great thing about being in this industry, and this is something I learned when I first came in, is that there's no secrets that are not held in. If it benefits one organization, it benefits all. Same as far as just being in Chattanooga or the country as a whole. If something I can share with you helps you create a better experience at your aquarium somewhere else, it probably means when someone's in Tennessee or they're passing through, they're like, we had such a great time at Shed that we want to come to the Tennessee Aquariums. We're passing through and we've heard great things about it. So that's the great thing about this industry. Anything that anyone has questions about, here to help. We want to be better together.
Do it together, I heard.
Exactly.
Earlier. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's awesome, Michael. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been just a fascinating conversation. Really enjoyed getting to hear about your history and all the great things that are happening at the Tennessee Aquarium. And for everybody out there who's watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros.